They said he'd betrayed his own kind. The rifles were already raised when the rancher stepped forward and said, "If you're going to kill them, you'll have to start with me." None of them knew the truth of why he was willing to die that night. If you enjoy emotional Western stories like this, subscribe for more, and tell us in the comments whose side you'd choose. The ranch sat where the desert met the foothills, 3 hours hard ride from town. No one came out that far unless they had to. The land was stubborn, more rock than soil, more dust than grass. A man could work himself to bone out there and have nothing to show but calluses and silence. Thomas Greer had chosen it that way. He was 43 years old, though his face carried more years than that. The sun had carved lines around his eyes. His hands were scarred from wire and wood and the kind of work that never ended. He spoke rarely. When he did go to town twice a year, maybe 3 times, he bought his supplies, paid in coin, and left before anyone could start a conversation. The townsfolk had their theories. Some said he'd killed a man back east. Others whispered he had Apache blood on his hands from the old days, when the army was still pushing hard into the territories. A few claimed he'd been a scout, one of those men who tracked for the soldiers, who knew the canyons and waterholes better than the Apache themselves. No one knew for certain. Thomas never confirmed or denied anything. He just worked his land, raised enough cattle to survive, and kept to himself. On a Tuesday morning in late August, he rode out to check the fence line near the eastern canyon. The heat was biblical. The sky stretched white and merciless overhead. His horse, a roan Mari named Sal, picked her way carefully over the stones. Thomas saw the buzzards first. 3 of them, circling low near a cluster of rocks about a half-mile off. He watched them for a long moment, then turned Sal toward the spot. Buzzards meant death, and death on his land meant questions he didn't want. When he got close, he dismounted and approached on foot. The body was a woman, Apache, maybe 30 years old. She'd been dead 2 days, maybe 3. Shot twice, once in the side, once in the back. Her clothing was torn. She'd been running. Thomas stood very still. He knew what this meant. The army had been through here recently. There'd been talk in town last month about a remnant band hiding in the mountains, refusing to move to the reservation. The soldiers had been sweeping the territory, pushing hard. He turned to leave. That's when he heard it. A sound, faint, like cloth dragging over stone. Thomas froze. His hand moved instinctively to the rifle on his saddle. He waited, listening. The desert was quiet except for the wind and the buzzards overhead. There it was again. Behind the rocks. He drew the rifle slowly, checked the load, and moved forward. His boots crunched on the dry earth. He came around the rock formation and stopped. 4 children. Apache children. The oldest maybe 10, the youngest no more than 5. They were pressed back against the canyon wall like cornered animals. Their faces were streaked with dirt and tears. They stared at him with eyes that expected death. The oldest, a girl with black hair falling past her shoulders, held a broken piece of wood like a weapon. Her hands shook, but she didn't lower it. Thomas looked at them for a long time. Then he lowered his rifle. "You speak English?" he asked quietly. The girl said nothing. The younger ones whimpered. One of them, a boy with a split lip, clung to her dress. Thomas glanced back toward where the woman's body lay. The mother, he guessed. Maybe an aunt. The children had been hiding while she led the soldiers away. He could ride to town right now, report what he'd found. The army would come collect them. There might even be a reward the government paid for captures, especially children who could be sent to the boarding schools back east. It would be the safe choice, the expected choice. Thomas looked at the children again, at their thin arms and hollow cheeks, at the terror in their eyes. He thought about the last time he'd made the safe choice. He thought about the screaming. "Stay here," he said finally. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." He walked back to Sal, pulled 2 canteens from the saddle, and a cloth sack with dried beef and bread. When he returned, the children hadn't moved. The girl still held her piece of wood. Thomas set the food and water on the ground, then stepped back. "Eat," he said. "Then we wait for dark." The ride back to the ranch took 4 hours in the darkness. Thomas led Sal on foot, the children walking single file behind him. He'd told them, through gestures and the few Apache words he remembered, to stay quiet. No talking, no crying. They obeyed. The girl walked at the rear, watching him constantly. The others stumbled with exhaustion. The smallest one, the boy, fell twice. Thomas picked him up without a word and carried him the rest of the way. The ranch house was dark when they arrived. Thomas led them to the barn, a weathered structure with a hayloft and a small tack room. He lit a single lantern and hung it from a beam. "Here," he said, pointing to the loft. "You sleep there, quiet, always quiet." He brought them blankets, old wool ones that smelled like horses. He brought more food, hard biscuits, jerky, a jar of preserves. He brought a bucket of water and a tin cup. The children ate like they hadn't seen food in days. They probably hadn't. When they finished, Thomas climbed down from the loft and stood at the base of the ladder. "Listen," he said, looking up at the girl. "Soldiers are looking, men from town. If they find you here, they'll kill you. If they find me hiding you, they'll kill me too. You understand?" The girl stared down at him. Her expression was unreadable. "No fire, no light in daytime, no noise. You stay here unless I say different. You understand?" She nodded once, slowly. Thomas nodded back. He took the lantern and walked to the barn door. Before he left, he turned back. "Your mother was brave," he said quietly. Then he closed the door behind him. The first week was the hardest. Thomas kept to his routine, checking cattle, mending fence, riding the property line. But every action was calculated now. He watched for dust clouds on the horizon. He listened for hoofbeats. He made sure anyone watching would see nothing unusual. At night, he brought the children food. He checked them for illness. He taught them the rules. "If you hear riders, you go to the cellar," he said, pointing to a trapdoor hidden beneath loose hay. "There's a tunnel. Goes 50 yards to the dry creek bed. You stay there until I come get you." The girl translated for the others. Her name was Nate, he learned. The boy with the split lip was her brother, Chato. The other two were cousin sisters named Kaya and Dotsie. They didn't trust him. That was clear. They ate his food and obeyed his rules, but they watched him like prisoners watch a guard, waiting for the moment he'd turn on them. Thomas didn't blame them. On the 9th day, riders came. Thomas was in the corral when he saw the dust. 3 men, moving fast from the direction of town. He recognized one of them, Henry Carlson, a deputy. The others were volunteers, part of the civilian militia that had formed to help the army with patrols. Thomas walked to the house, grabbed his hat, and met them at the gate. "Carlson," he said evenly. The deputy pulled up his horse. He was a thick man with a red face and a badge that caught the sun. "Greer," Carlson said. "We're making rounds, checking properties. For what?" "Apache stragglers. Army thinks some scattered after the fight up near Copper Ridge. Could be hiding out in the canyons." Carlson squinted at the barn. "You seen anything unusual?" "No." "You sure?" "Someone reported tracks near your eastern fence line." Thomas kept his face neutral. "I ride that fence every week." "Haven't seen tracks." One of the other men, a younger settler named Davies, leaned forward in his saddle. "You mind if we take a look around?" "Just to be sure." Thomas looked at him. "I do mind, actually. This is my land." "We got authority," Carlson said. "Governor's order. We can search any property if there's suspicion." "You got suspicion?" "We got reports." Thomas considered this. If he refused, they'd come back with more men. If he let them search, they might find something, a footprint, a scrap of cloth, a sign he'd missed. "All right," he said finally. "Take your look. But make it quick." "I got work." He watched them search the barn, the house, the sheds. They poked through hay bales and peered into stalls. Carlson walked the property perimeter while the other two checked the canyon approaches. They found nothing. The children were in the tunnel, pressed against damp earth, holding their breath. After an hour, Carlson remounted his horse. "We'll be back through here next week," he said. "You see anything, tracks, smoke, anything, you report it. Understood?" "Understood." The men rode off. Thomas watched until they disappeared into the heat shimmer. Then he went to the barn and gave the signal 3 slow knocks on the trapdoor. The children emerged slowly, covered in dust. The youngest, Dotsie, was crying silently. Nate held her close. "You did good," Thomas said. "Real good." Nate looked at him. "They will come back." "Yes." "What then?" Thomas didn't have an answer. The days became routine. Thomas worked the ranch. The children stayed hidden. At night, he brought them supplies and taught them what they needed to survive. He showed Nate the signal for Danger 3 rocks stacked by the fence post. If she saw it, she was to take the others and run to a cave he'd marked 2 miles north. He gave her a map scratched on leather. He showed her which plants were safe to eat, which water holes were clean. "You might have to go without me," he said one night. Nate studied the map. "You think they will find us? I think they'll keep looking until they do." "Then why do you help?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "Because someone has to. That is not a reason. It's the only one I got." But that wasn't true, and they both knew it. In the 3rd week, Chato fell ill. Thomas found him burning with fever, his small body shaking. The boy's lips were cracked and pale. He'd been coughing for 2 days but hadn't told anyone. "Why didn't you come get me?" Thomas demanded. Nate looked away. "We did not think you would care." Thomas stared at her. Then he scooped Chato up and carried him to the house. He laid the boy on his own bed, the first time he'd let any of them inside the house proper. He boiled water, made a poultice from herbs he kept for the horses. He wrapped Chato in blankets and sat with him through the night, changing the cloth on his forehead every hour. Nate stood in the doorway, watching. "You can come in," Thomas said without looking up. She stepped inside slowly. She'd never seen the inside of a white man's home before. It was sparse: a table, 2 chairs, a stove, shelves with a few books. On the mantel, there was a single photograph in a cracked frame. "Who is that?" she asked. Thomas glanced at the photo. A woman with kind eyes, a small boy standing beside her. "My wife," he said. "My son, where are they?" "Dead, cholera, 6 years ago." Nate was quiet. Then, "I am sorry." Thomas nodded. He dipped the cloth in cool water and pressed it to Chato's forehead again. "Will he die?" Nate asked. "Not if I can help it." She sat down on the floor near the bed. They stayed like that through the night, the white rancher and the Apache girl, keeping vigil over a fevered child. By morning, the fever had broken. Chato opened his eyes and looked around in confusion. When he saw Thomas, he flinched. But then Nate spoke to him softly in Apache, and the boy relaxed. Thomas made broth. He fed it to Chato slowly, 1 spoonful at a time. The boy was weak, but he kept it down. "Thank you," Nate said quietly. Thomas didn't respond. He just kept feeding the boy. But something had shifted. The children still watched him, but the fear had softened. They began to speak around him. Small words at first, then sentences. The sisters Kaya and Dotsie began to play in the loft quiet games with sticks and stones. Chato followed Thomas around like a shadow. The boy was curious about everything. He watched Thomas mend harnesses and shoe horses. He pointed at tools and waited for Thomas to name them. One evening, Thomas carved a small wooden horse. He worked by lamplight while the children ate dinner in the loft. When he finished, he climbed the ladder and handed it to Chato. The boy stared at it, then at Thomas. His eyes were wide. "For me?" Thomas nodded. Chato clutched the horse to his chest. He smiled, the first smile Thomas had seen from any of them. Nate watched this exchange. Her expression was complicated. Later, after the younger ones had fallen asleep, she sat with Thomas at the base of the ladder. "Why do you live alone?" she asked. "Easier that way." "That is not an answer." Thomas looked at her. She was young, but her eyes were old. She'd seen things no child should see. "I used to be different," he said finally. "Used to talk more, laugh, had plans." He paused. "Then my family died. And I realized plans don't mean much. So you hide here." "I guess so." "We hide too," Naish said. "But we do not choose it." Thomas nodded slowly. "No, I suppose you don't." They sat in silence. Outside, coyotes called to each other across the desert. "The men who killed my mother," Naish said quietly. "They were blue, like the soldiers, but there were others with them. Men in regular clothes. One of them had a mark on his face. Here," she touched her cheek. "A burn, I think." Thomas went very still. "Did you see where they went?" he asked carefully. "North, toward the mountains. They said they were hunting the others. The rest of our people." She looked at him. "Do you think they will find them?" Thomas didn't answer. He couldn't, because he knew exactly who she was talking about. The end came on a Saturday. Thomas was working the south fence when he saw the dust. Not 3 riders this time. More like 20. They were coming from town, moving in a wide line like they were driving cattle or herding prey. Thomas dropped his tools and ran for Sal. He rode hard back to the ranch, his mind racing. Someone had talked. Someone had seen something. Or maybe they'd just decided to search every property within 50 miles. It didn't matter why. They were coming. He reached the barn and gave the signal 3 fast knocks. The children appeared at the loft edge. Naish saw his face and understood immediately. "Get to the tunnel," Thomas said. "Now, they will find it," Naish said. "Maybe, but it's your only chance. What about you?" "I'll slow them down." "Give you time to reach the cave." Naish hesitated. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something. Then she turned and herded the others toward the trapdoor. Thomas watched them disappear into the darkness below. Then he closed the trapdoor and scattered hay over it. He walked outside and waited. The riders arrived in a cloud of dust. 23 men. Carlson was there, along with Davies and a dozen others Thomas recognized from town. But there were also soldiers' real cavalry, led by a lieutenant named Morrison. And at the front of the group, sitting tall in his saddle, was Samuel Cole. Thomas felt his stomach turn. Cole was a big man with gray hair and a burn scar that covered half his left cheek. He'd been a scout for the army back in the old days, one of the best. He and Thomas had ridden together on a dozen campaigns. They'd been friends once. Cole pulled up his horse 10 feet from where Thomas stood. "Tom," he said evenly. "Sam, been a long time." "Not long enough." Cole smiled without humor. "I heard you'd gone soft. Living out here like a hermit." I didn't believe it. He gestured at the men behind him. "But then I heard something interesting. Someone saw smoke from your property in the middle of the night. Smoke from the barn, not the house. Strange thing, that. I work late sometimes. In the dark? If I need to." Carlson urged his horse forward. "We're going to search the property, Greer. You can cooperate, or we can make this difficult." Thomas looked at him, then at Morrison. The lieutenant was young, maybe 25. He looked uncomfortable. "This is my land," Thomas said quietly. "It's the territory's land," Cole corrected. "You just work it. And right now the territory needs to know if you're hiding hostiles." "I'm not." "Then you won't mind if we look." Thomas knew he couldn't stop them. Not 23 armed men. But he could buy time. "You got a warrant?" "We got authorization from the governor," Morrison said. "That's all we need. Show me the paper." Morrison looked annoyed. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Thomas took it, unfolded it slowly, and read every word. It took 3 minutes. Every second mattered. Finally, he handed it back. "All right, search." The men dismounted. They spread out across the property. Cole headed straight for the barn. Thomas followed. Inside, Cole walked slowly through the space, examining everything. He poked at hay bales. He checked the stalls. He climbed to the loft and studied the corners. Then he stopped. "Tom," he called down. "Come up here." Thomas climbed the ladder. Cole was standing near the back corner, holding something small. A wooden horse. Shauto's wooden horse. "This yours?" Cole asked. Thomas said nothing. Cole turned it over in his hands. "Seems fresh. I can still smell the wood shavings." He looked at Thomas. "You take up carving in your spare time?" "Maybe. You always were a bad liar, Tom." Cole pocketed the horse and walked to the edge of the loft. "Davies! Morrison! Get in here." The men came running. Cole pointed to the floor. "There's a trapdoor under that hay. I can see the outline. Open it." Thomas watched as they cleared the hay away. Found the trapdoor. Pulled it open. Morrison lit a torch and climbed down. Thomas could hear him moving through the tunnel. Footsteps on packed earth. A shout. "Lieutenant!" Morrison called up. "Tracks! Fresh ones, 4 sets small, like children." Cole looked at Thomas. "Where are they?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The hell you don't." Cole grabbed Thomas by the shirt and slammed him against a support beam. "You've been hiding them." "How long, Tom? Weeks? A month?" Thomas said nothing. Cole's face was inches from his own. "You know what they'll do to you? You know what the penalty is for harboring hostiles? They're children. They're Apache." "They're children," Thomas repeated. "Orphans. They got nowhere to go. So you thought you'd play savior?" Cole released him roughly. "After everything we did? After all the blood?" "Maybe because of it." Cole stared at him. Then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Copper Ridge," he said softly. Thomas looked away. "That's what this is about, isn't it? You're trying to balance the books. There are no books to balance, Sam. What we did was our job. We were following orders. We killed everyone," Thomas said quietly. "Women, children, old people. We burned the village with them still inside. They were enemy combatants. They were people." Cole shook his head. "You've gone soft." "I knew it." He turned to Morrison. "Lieutenant, organize a search party. Those children can't have gotten far." Morrison nodded and climbed out of the tunnel. Thomas grabbed Cole's arm. "Sam, please. They're just kids. They got no weapons, no family." Cole jerked his arm free. "You should have thought about that before you committed treason." Outside, the men were mounting up. Morrison was dividing them into search groups. Carlson was checking weapons. Thomas stood in the barn doorway, his mind racing. The children would be at the cave by now. But caves could be found. Tracks could be followed. It was only a matter of time, unless he bought them more time. He walked to the center of the yard. "Wait," he called out. The men stopped, turned. Thomas took a breath. "They're at the North Cave," he said clearly. 2 miles that way. Follow the dry creek bed. You'll find them." Cole rode forward. "You're telling us where they are?" "I'm telling you where they'll be if you waste time searching." "But here's the thing." Thomas looked around at all the men. "I'm going with you. And when we get there, I'm going to stand between you and those children. You want to take them, you're going to have to go through me first." A murmur ran through the crowd. Morrison looked confused. That's crazy." "You'd be killed, maybe." "Why would you do that?" Davies asked. "They're just Indians." Thomas looked at him. "You got kids, Davies?" The man nodded. 2 boys. How old?" 7 and 9. "And if someone came to kill them, just walked up and put a gun to their heads, what would you do?" Davies frowned. "I'd stop them. Any way I could." "Even if it meant your own life?" "Of course," Thomas nodded. "Then you understand exactly why I'm doing this." Cole stepped his horse closer. "Tom, this is foolish. You can't protect them. You're one man." "I know, but I can slow you down. Make you think twice." Thomas looked up at him. "I can make you see them as children instead of targets. They're enemy children. There's no enemy anymore, Sam. The wars are over. These are just kids who watched their mother die. Kids who've been hiding and starving and running for weeks." Thomas's voice was steady but hard. "And if you kill them, it'll be murder. Not combat, not duty. Just plain murder. Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his saddle. A few of the other men exchanged glances. Cole's jaw tightened. You're asking us to let them go. I'm asking you to remember what mercy looks like. Mercy? Cole laughed bitterly. You want to talk about mercy? Tell me about the mercy the Apache showed at Whiskey Creek, or Red Bluff, or... I know, Thomas interrupted. I know what they did. I was there, remember? I saw the bodies. I buried settlers who'd been cut down, but these children didn't do that. They weren't even born when those raids happened. Their fathers did it. Their brothers, and our fathers drove their grandfathers off their land. Our brothers shot their uncles. When does it end, Sam? When do we decide that children aren't accountable for their parents' sins? Cole's face was hard. It ends when there are no more Apache to fight. Then it never ends, Thomas said quietly. Because hate like that just breeds more hate, more blood, more children hiding in caves. He turned to address all the men. I know what you've lost, he said. I know some of you have buried family. I know you've got reasons to want revenge. But those 4 children didn't kill your kin. They're just trying to survive, he paused. And if you kill them tonight, you'll have to live with it. Every one of you. You'll see their faces when you close your eyes. You'll hear them in your dreams. And you'll wonder if maybe there was another way. Silence fell over the group. Then Davies spoke up. He's right. Cole turned to him sharply. What? He's right. They're just kids. Double quotes. Davies looked uncomfortable. I didn't sign up to shoot children. Me neither, another man said. Then another. Morrison cleared his throat. Lieutenant Cole, perhaps we should. I'm not a lieutenant anymore. Cole snapped. But I am still a scout. And I know my duty. He looked at Thomas. You want to die protecting them? Fine, let's ride. The ride to the cave took 30 minutes. Thomas led the way on Sal, followed by Cole and Morrison, with the rest of the men trailing behind. The moon was high, casting long shadows across the desert. No one spoke. When they reached the dry creek bed, Thomas dismounted. He handed Sal's reins to Morrison and walked forward alone. The cave entrance was a dark opening in the canyon wall, half hidden by scrub brush. Thomas stopped about 20 feet away. Nate, he called softly. It's me. Silence. Nate, I need you to come out. Bring the others. More silence. Then, slowly, a small figure emerged from the darkness. Nate. She held Chato's hand. Behind her, the 2 sisters clung to each other. When she saw the armed men, Nate stopped. You led them here, she said. Her voice was flat. Yes, you lied to us. No, I kept you alive as long as I could. Thomas took a step toward her. But now it's over. They found the tunnel. They found your tracks. It was only a matter of time, so you give up. No. Thomas walked past her and stood between the children and the men. He turned to face the riders. 23 rifles pointed back at him. Here's what's going to happen, Thomas said calmly. You're going to lower those weapons. You're going to let these children go. You're going to give them water and food for 3 days. And you're going to point them north, toward the reservation. Cole laughed. Or what? Or you're going to have to shoot me first. Tom, don't be stupid. I'm done being smart, Sam. I've been smart my whole life. It got me a dead family, a burned village on my conscience, and a ranch in the middle of nowhere where I can pretend I'm not the man I used to be. Thomas's voice was steady. But tonight, I'm choosing different. Tonight, I'm standing here and saying no. You want those kids, you kill me first. Behind him, Thomas heard Nate gasp. She understood enough English to know what he'd said. Morrison looked at Cole. Sir, I don't think I can. Then get out of the way, Cole said. He raised his rifle. Thomas didn't flinch. Do it, he said quietly. Pull the trigger, but know that everyone here will remember. They'll remember the night Samuel Cole shot an unarmed man in the back to get to 4 starving children. That's going to be your story, Sam. That's how you'll be remembered. Cole's finger was on the trigger. His face was twisted with anger, but his hand shook. "Damn you," he whispered. "I already am," Thomas said. The moment stretched. The desert wind whistled through the canyon. The horses stamped and snorted. Then, slowly, Cole lowered his rifle. "This is wrong," he said hoarsely. "I know. They're the enemy. They're children." Cole looked at Thomas for a long time. Then he looked past him, at the four small figures huddled together in the darkness. His shoulders sagged. "Lieutenant Morrison," he said quietly. "Stand down." Morrison looked relieved. "Yes, sir. The rest of you lower your weapons." One by one, the rifles came down. Thomas turned to Nate. Her eyes were wide with disbelief. "You're letting us go?" she asked. "Why?" Thomas knelt down so he was at her eye level. "Because someone should have let your mother go. Someone should have let all of them go." He paused. "I can't fix what I did, Nate. But maybe I can keep it from happening again." Nate stared at him. Then, suddenly, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck. Thomas froze. Then, slowly, he put his arms around her small body. Behind them, Chato started crying. Then the sisters. They rushed forward and clung to Thomas, sobbing. The men on horseback watched in silence. Finally, Thomas gently pulled away. "You need to go," he said. "North. Follow the stars. 3 days' walk. There will be people there. Your people." "What about you?" Nate asked. Thomas smiled sadly. "I'll be fine. They will hurt you. Maybe, but that's not your problem anymore." He stood and turned to Morrison. "Give them water and food." "Enough for the journey," Morrison nodded. He dismounted and brought out his canteen and saddlebags. Other men did the same. They piled supplies at the children's feet: dried meat, biscuits, blankets, a spare canteen. Davies even handed over his own jacket. "For the little one," he said. "Gets cold at night." The children gathered the supplies. Naisha organized them, dividing the load. She was already taking charge, already planning. She would survive, Thomas realized. She was strong enough. When they were ready, Nate turned back to Thomas one last time. "I heard them," she said quietly. "The men, they said you helped the soldiers before. They said you led them to our villages." Thomas felt his heart stop. Is it true? He wanted to lie, wanted to deny it. But he'd done enough lying. "Yes," he said. Nate's face hardened. "Did you lead them to my mother's village?" Thomas closed his eyes. "I don't know. Maybe. I led them to so many ... He opened his eyes and looked at her. "I'm sorry, Nate. I can't take it back. All I can do is try to make sure it doesn't happen again." Nate was quiet for a long time. The other children watched her, waiting for her judgment. Then she reached into her dress and pulled out something small. The wooden horse Thomas had carved for Chato. She held it out to him. "Keep this," she said, "so you remember." Thomas took the horse. His hand shook. "I won't forget," he said hoarsely. Nate nodded. Then she turned and led her little group into the darkness, heading north toward safety. The men watched them disappear into the night. After the children were gone, the silence was heavy. Cole dismounted and walked over to Thomas. For a moment, Thomas thought he might hit him. Instead, Cole just looked tired. "You're a fool," he said. "Probably. They'll find out about this. The town, the army, you'll be labeled a traitor. Run out of the territory, if you're lucky." "I know. Was it worth it?" Thomas looked at the wooden horse in his hand. "Ask me in 20 years. Cole shook his head. "I can't protect you, Tom. I can't stop what's coming." "I'm not asking you to." Morrison approached. "Mr. Greer, I have to report what happened here. I can try to minimize certain details, but..." "Don't," Thomas interrupted. "Tell them exactly what happened. Tell them I harbored enemy children. Tell them I stood between armed men and their lawful duty. Tell them whatever you want." He looked at Cole. "The truth is the truth. I'm done hiding from it." Morrison nodded slowly. "Yes, sir." The men mounted up. One by one, they rode away, heading back toward town. Cole was the last to leave. He sat on his horse, looking down at Thomas. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I think maybe you're the brave one. And I'm the coward. You lowered your rifle, Sam. That took courage too. Or weakness. I'm not sure which." Cole turned his horse. Then he paused. "There was a girl at Copper Ridge," he said. "Maybe 10 years old. She reminded me of my daughter. I watched her burn." He looked at Thomas. "I never told anyone that. I never said it out loud." Thomas nodded slowly. "Now you have. Does that make it better?" "No, but maybe it makes you honest." Cole rode away without another word. Thomas stood alone in the desert as dawn began to break. The sky turned from black to gray to pale gold. The heat hadn't started yet, but it would come soon. He looked down at the wooden horse in his hand. Somewhere to the north, 4 children were walking toward freedom. They would make it, he thought. Nature was smart and strong. She would get them to safety. And Thomas? He knew what was coming. The town would hear about what he'd done. Some would call him a traitor. Others might call him mad. A few, very few, might understand. But it didn't matter what they called him. What mattered was that 4 children who should have died were still breathing. 4 children who'd lost everything had been given a chance. That was enough. Thomas put the wooden horse in his pocket and walked back to Sal. He mounted up and rode slowly toward his ranch. The sun was rising now, painting the desert in shades of copper and rust. He thought about his wife, his son. What would they think of what he'd done? He liked to imagine they'd be proud. As he rode, Thomas noticed something in the sand ahead. He pulled Sal to a stop and dismounted. 3 rocks, stacked carefully on top of each other. The danger signal, but arranged differently, deliberately. He knelt down and examined them more closely. Scratched into the top rock was a crude symbol, a horse. Chato's work, he guessed. A thank you, or a goodbye. Thomas smiled. It was a sad smile, but genuine. He left the rocks where they were and rode on. 2 weeks later, the army came. Not with rifles this time, but with papers. Official documents charging him with harboring enemy combatants and obstructing lawful duty. The penalty was imprisonment or exile from the territory. Thomas didn't fight it. He sold the ranch to a cattle company from Denver. He packed his few belongings, clothes, books, his wife's photograph, and a wooden horse into saddlebags. The day before he left, Davies rode out to see him. "I wanted to say something," Davies said awkwardly. "About that night. You don't need to." "I do." Davies looked uncomfortable. "I've been thinking about it, about what you said. About my boys." He paused. "You were right. If someone came for them, I'd do anything to protect them, anything. And those Apache kids, they were somebody's children too." Thomas nodded. "Where will you go?" Davies asked. "West, maybe, California. Find work somewhere I'm not known. That's a hard way to live." "Starting over. Harder than what I've been doing?" Thomas smiled slightly. "Least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror." Davies shifted in his saddle. "There's talk in town. Some folks are angry, but some are saying maybe you did the right thing. It split people. Made them think. That's something, I guess." Davies held out his hand. Thomas shook it. "Good luck, Greer." "You too." Davies rode off. Thomas watched him go, then turned back to his packing. On his last night at the ranch, Thomas sat on the porch and watched the stars. The desert was quiet except for the coyotes and the wind. He thought about all the choices he'd made, the village he'd helped destroy, the children he'd helped save, the life he was leaving behind. Were the scales balanced? Could they ever be? He didn't know. Maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe the point was just to keep trying. To choose mercy when mercy was hard. To stand up when standing up meant falling. Thomas pulled out the wooden horse and turned it over in his hands. The wood was smooth, worn from being carried in his pocket. He thought about Chato's smile when he'd received it. The way the boy had clutched it to his chest like it was treasure. That moment, That simple, small moment of joy was worth something. It had to be. Thomas stood and walked to the fence. He looked north, toward the mountains where the reservation lay. "Be safe," he whispered to the darkness. "Grow up, live long lives. Be happy." The wind carried his words away. Thomas Greer left the territory on a Tuesday morning. He rode west with everything he owned on his back and a wooden horse in his pocket. Behind him, the ranch stood empty. The barn doors creaked in the wind. The fence posts cast long shadows across the dust. In time, new people would come. They would work the land and build new stories. The old ones would fade like footprints in sand. But somewhere in the mountains, 4 children would grow up. They would remember the white rancher who stood between them and death. They would tell their children, and their children would tell theirs. And maybe, in the telling, the story would change. Maybe the rancher would become a hero, brave and noble from the start. Or maybe they would tell the truth, that he was a man who had done terrible things, who had blood on his hands and ghosts in his dreams, but who chose in one dark moment to do something different, to choose mercy over revenge, to choose children over country, to choose what was right over what was easy. The sun climbed higher. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions. And Thomas Greer rode on, alone but not empty, broken but not defeated, guilty but somehow finally beginning to heal. Behind him, 3 rocks stood stacked in the sand. A signal, a message, a memory. They remained there long after he was gone, speaking to no one and everyone, telling a story that the desert would keep forever, that mercy costs everything. But some prices are worth paying.
Thanks for watching this story till the end. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And before you go, check out these other amazing Western stories waiting for you next. Subscribe, like, and I'll see you on the next ride.